Hi, this is American Literature, Phyllis Wheatley. Um, we're going to talk in some detail about only one poem by Phyllis Wheatley today. That is To His Excellency General Washington. For background for this, you might want to go back and review what I've posted for you about early American literature, that period, and also some characteristics of neoclassical literature. Those two postings should be available for you on Google Classroom. You already know a little bit about Phyllis Wheatley's background. A reminder, at the time she's writing this, she's a recently freed slave, I believe. I believe she was freed in 1774. But she's brought to America as a slave. And she is an African American person living in a colony that quite literally does not even recognize the rights of African American peoples. She's writing this in 1775. It is published in 1775 and again in 1776. I want you to go back, remember your history a little bit. This is the time of the Revolutionary War, okay? So remember, poetry from this period is supposed to address the big issues. She is addressing somebody, General Washington, about the topic of the war. He is not yet president because we are not yet a country. We are still a colony in rebellion. Okay? This is a Revolutionary War. So I want you to pay attention to the date. I want you to pay attention to a couple of other things. This is actually written as a letter and published in newspapers in the colonies at this time. And this was a perfectly appropriate way to address letters and comments to celebrities at the time. We don't have the internet, we don't have social media, no Twitter, no Instagram, no Facebook, no television, no, not even telephones, telegrams, okay? All we have is newspapers, and you can also print up newspapers and hang them on the sides of buildings. Those are called flyers, okay? This is how she's communicating. I want you to remember the irony, which is pretty apparent to many people reading this, especially to non-Americans reading this and people of color, that she is a Black person who comes to America as a slave, and she is writing on the topic of a war where the people in the revolution are basically opposing unfair representation, and they say they are fighting for freedom. One of the things they specifically mention in one of the earlier versions of the Declaration of Independence is that King George has enslaved people on the sea to work in his navy as sailors. They strike that because even the founding fathers can see that it's ridiculous for a country that still legalizes slavery to fight a war against slavery for freedom. Okay, but she is writing about a war that Americans are saying for our freedom. Okay, as we look more deeply into the poem itself, I want you to think about the topic. It's kind of epic. It's about a great thing, as wars in the neoclassical are, about a great war. Okay? I want you to pay attention to the form. I want you to pay attention specifically to heroic couplet, that's its form, and the many, many allusions. There's obviously rhyme and alliteration in there, but it's the allusions that make it difficult to read, but also the allusions which would have made it interesting to its readers. Look up the definition of allusion now if you don't know it, but essentially it means a reference to something, generally speaking, that the writer assumes the audience would understand. So if I say 9/11, you understand immediately what I'm referring to. I am referring to the terrorist attack on America on 9/11/2001. Okay? That's an allusion. Let's see. I could give more, but I'll go on. I also want you to notice that there's a clear appeal to a very specific American myth that will become very obvious as we go through the poem. We get to the end, I will point it out to you. All right, but I want us to actually start with the format of the poem. Okay. The link you have been given is actually not very accurate in terms of the presentation of the poem. The poem actually comes with a preface, which appears when it is published in the newspaper. It says, "Sir, I have taken the freedom," notice the irony of that. She is a freed slave, taking the freedom. "Sir, I have taken the freedom to address your Excellency in the enclosed poem, and entreat your acceptance, though I am not insensible of its inaccuracies. Your being appointed by the Grand Continental Congress to be generalissimo of the armies of North America, together with the fame of your virtues, excite sensations not easy to suppress." In other words, it's not quite an accurate poem, but please take it anyway. I'm praising you so much. I can't help it because you're such a great man. Your generosity, therefore, I presume, will pardon the attempt. Wishing your Excellency all possible successes in the great cause you are so generously engaged in the Revolutionary War, I am your Excellency's most obedient, humble servant, Phyllis Wheatley. This is published in Providence, Rhode Island, October 26th, 1775. That's how the letter is signed. To His Excellency, General Washington. Then the poem begins. Okay, so we're actually up to 6 minutes. So I'm going to stop this video here, and I'm going to go on in the next video in much more detail about the poem.